Good morning. I'm Michael Dunn.
John Walters, board member.
Janice Walthour is joining us via Zoom.
Okay, we're doing the
Janice
introduction.
Walthour.
Okay, thank you,
Can you hear
Janice.
me?
Yes, thank you, Janice.
Yeah, thank you,
Janice
Janice. Okay,
Walthour.
we do have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the June meeting minutes. I'm going to make the motion, but with a couple of corrections. If you look at the meeting minutes themselves, actually, John's last name is left off in the opening section. And under questions, weekend is misspelled. And under the Smurla report, in the first line, item A, it's 1 year, not years, plural. So again, I'm making the motion with those corrections. If I can get a second.
I'll second the corrections.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I do have one. It's about a couple of expressions used. What does hoopla stand for?
Hoopla is the name of one of our digital resources. It gets audiobooks, ebooks, music, and video. And unlike some of our other services, the titles are always available, which is convenient. Not so convenient is the fact that every time somebody uses Hoopla, we pay per use. So it's difficult to track the budget on it, but it's a resource that just a lot of libraries use.
Okay, and one line down, what is Overdrive?
Overdrive is another one of our digital resources. Its app is called Libby, and one gets ebooks and audiobooks that way.
Okay, any other questions? If not, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Aye.
And if you or anybody of the public listening would like a tutorial on how to get access to those resources and get lots of great digital content, please contact your librarian.
Okay, so I'll make, again, for the following item, the EALs or the expenses, I'll make the motion to open the discussion of the EALs, and I'll begin with my questions, perhaps, just two minor ones. I saw the name Penworthy as a book resource. I was unfamiliar with that name. I don't think I've seen it before. What is Penworthy? It's on the first page on the Penworthy Company, Books and Material, 3,881.
This is Belinda. It is one of our companies. We have used it numerous times.
Oh, yeah, okay. I guess I obviously missed it. And also on the Smurla, there was an expense of, I think, $20,000. That seemed very high. What was that for, beside the maintenance? Was that just the maintenance?
What page are you on?
This is Belinda again. So that was a specific purchase of digital content that we made. It was a $20,000 digital content purchase at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
So may I have a question
I can
there?
tell you so what we do is with the digital content, they buy it for us and then we reimburse them.
So that was not a 3-county buy, that was for us?
That was using our collection money.
Okay, thank you.
So we had a bunch of money left at the end of the year that wasn't spent, and so we put it towards digital content.
Why did Smurla buy it instead of us?
Because they are the ones that hold the account with Overdrive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, basically,
So
well, we can have our own unique
They buy
content.
it all and then we reimburse them.
They get most of the content for the tri-counties, and then what they do then is when we want something that's called an advantage title for us only, they can get that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I should have asked for the second, so if I can get a second.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, all in favor of accepting EALs, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. It's mentioned on the agenda about the treasurer's report. However, that was not that was going to happen. You may recall that we approved the treasurer's report to be presented on a quarterly basis. So we obviously then skipping over this month and next month as well.
So you want that in,
Clarify that.
you want that
Would
in
it
Sep,
be- Would it
want that
be
in
for the
September?
period ending
Yes.
in October, we're through September? Is that,
No, I thought it was to do it in September up to that point. So it's really trying to hit on the last month of the year. Yeah, that's a good point. Should it be the first month? But I think we chose more to go with the September timeframe.
okay.
Okay, on the Smyrna report, there was no Smyrna meeting in July, but I did want to talk a little bit about something that did occur over the course of the last month. I mentioned in previous meetings that there was a proposal by the State Library Board to really change the makeup of the regional boards. In fact, the current regional board, which consists of 3 members from each county system, would be eliminated in effect and then replaced by a 5-member board. None of it would, only one individual would come from the 3 systems in total. Now, that would require a legislative change in order to accomplish that. And it was the objective of the State Library Board meeting in the latter part of June to do so. And a certain segment of the state law would have to be altered or added to or changed in order to accomplish that. However, prior to the meeting, that item was not discussed. In fact, was removed from the board meeting. Now, the significance of that, of course, is that any approval in the legislative process takes considerable lead time. And so as far as I understand, that whole change into the makeup of the board of the regional organizations will not take place. So we will continue to operate as we do currently and into the future. I'm not going to go into some of the reasoning why that change occurred, but I do hope that this whole effort really will make some changes in having the regionals operate even closer to the state library and with each other. And not only at the regional level, because they do that, but also even at the board level, so that, again, we're working more in conjunction and working together and understanding what each individual regional operation is experiencing.
Jim, are you saying that if that thing comes back to life, we do or do not support it?
We did not support it. We never have, nor the other regionals. Okay, so that's the final report then. So, Michael, I think we're over to you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll begin with some celebrations. Our first celebration is a hip hip hooray for Zoe Downs, who's a library at Leonardtown, and thank you for your dedicated work in organizing the genealogy collection at the Leonardtown Library, your cooperation with the St. Mary's County Genealogical Society, your development of a spreadsheet identifying all the items held and their location in the collection, and your identification of items not in our catalog will provide researchers, librarians, and customers easy and usable access to this valuable collection. Excellent work, and Jim, I'll get you to sign this before you go, please. Thank you, Zoe, for that. Trying to just make all those many items in the Maryland/Mary Lee Russell room more visible, more discoverable. There are things in there that we hadn't really cataloged properly, so that's great news. Our second anniversary is for Jeff Powers. Jeff does work in IT for us, and he's sort of a system-wide person, but then also at Leonardtown, and he'll be working on things like the makerspace, the computer lab there, and he has now got 10 years in at the library, so congratulations, Jeff. Information will just start with a basic statistics review of what happened in FY21. It's probably going to be a year from this time before we have any sort of apples-to-apples comparison month to month. But we can look at the whole of last year, and frankly, I'm surprised things weren't down more given the the pandemic. How very often we were closed or had limited hours. But we held our own in some areas, certainly. Yeah, so not surprisingly, something like the number of programs was going to be down. and attendance, we weren't really keeping track of that because we didn't have any in-person programming. Our visitor count is obviously going to be way down. So something like curbside appointments, which didn't exist last year, we can't, the prior year, we can't really compare very much there. So, as I say, sort of making sense of statistical changes, even on a fiscal year basis, is kind of difficult to do. But I am pleased that we did see our digital use go up 23% for the fiscal year over the prior year. And that our blog sessions and website visits were all sort of going up some. And so the areas where we could really reach out, we saw some growth. And not surprisingly, in some other areas, in light of the pandemic, not so much. I take note that the pandemic is far from over. Right now in our area, we don't seem to be seeing an increase in cases, but we're keeping a watch on that just to make sure that we don't have to go into any sort of closure again or reinstitute a mask wearing. But we will. We're following what the county health department says and monitoring cases in Maryland. So far, Maryland seems to be doing pretty well compared to some other areas in the state where the vaccination rate is not so high. So let's hope that next year at this time, we will actually have a full year of more or less full operations. We have been talking about instituting in-person programming again, and we're looking at that for mid-fall to come back. The meeting rooms are open at this point, so we're pretty much back to full operations. Once we get the in-person programming in place, we'll have a better idea of how we're doing compared to some prior years, and just hope that the area stays safe enough that people can come out and visit the library a lot. Any questions about the statistics? And again, it's it's just very difficult to really do a lot with them when there was just so much closure going on.
Have the meeting rooms seen a lot of use since they've reopened?
Not so far, but they just reopened on July 1st, and I'm not certain that a lot of people even know that they are open again. But we are scheduling those events for those.
I also think with school out now, use for tutoring was likely to go down anyway.
That's certainly true, but we do have people using those small study rooms at Lexington Park and Leonardtown just for other things, and I'm sure that once people realize they're open and we're getting the word out on that we'll start to see more people use the meeting rooms for this, that, and the other thing. Of course, some people are probably still being quite cautious about in-person meetings, but we think we'll start to see a growth there again.
Michael, in terms of using those rooms, are they still receiving the appropriate cleaning after each use or daily or whatever?
They're getting daily cleanings, yes. We have up signs that basically indicate that use of the meeting rooms is, we don't have the personnel to do a deep cleaning every time. So we do have cleaning supplies there. The air filters are still there in place. So people know that they need to kind of wipe things down ahead of time if they want to use the space. But surface contact, we finally discovered, it would seem, is really very limited and not very likely, especially now that about probably 55-60% of St. Mary's County population has received the vaccination. So I'm less worried about that than people who might not be vaccinated crowding into a space, but they are aware that it's kind of, you use at your own discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. we have two budget reports to look at. The first was just what the end of the last year budget looks like, and these figures won't be final until such time as the audit is done. But the auditor's already working very closely with Belinda, and we are hopeful that we're going to have an earlier audit than we have had perhaps in the past, so that we'll be able to have you approve that before the November 1st deadline. But if you look at these, I think the primary sort of thing to look at is overall income versus outgo. And again, these figures will be corrected by the auditor, and we have an accountant looking at them as well. That sort of the process happens before the audit happens. But if these figures were correct, we would dip into our fund balance by $283. So we stayed right on budget for the most part. And I think more or less stayed in line. There's some things that are just really hard when you having personnel changes or different staffing, or people can get health benefits even though, they had a life change and didn't have to rely on the open enrollment. So looking pretty good, and with any luck, these figures will be very close. In the past, there's been no more than several $1,000s changes. So I'm anticipating not having a surplus for this past fiscal year, but being more or less on budget.
Michael, how much of that fortuitous outcome could you attribute to our reduced operations in the past year? And if that's the case, do you see that coming around to bite us as we get back to full steam?
No, I don't think so. The main expenditure is personnel. And we did have a fair, as we'll discuss later in this meeting, a fair number of high-level retirements of people who were making a fair amount of money, and we replaced them at a lower cost, but we've budgeted for that for this upcoming year. So I think we'll be pretty much right on track. The wild card, well, there's a couple wild cards, and one we'll talk about, that mobile library. But the other will be, we're starting to have in-person meetings again. And while I'm hoping that most organizations will keep Zoom as an option, so for something like a statewide meeting, we don't necessarily have to go to Allegheny County or far out on the Eastern Shore. But there will be some meetings. ALA annual next year, for example, will be, I believe it's Washington, D.C., so not so far away, but we'll have to send people to that. We do have a staff development grant that will cover most of those expenses, but we just have to make sure that we're kind of staying within that grant funding. So the kind of one difference might be a little bit more gas money, a little bit more travel funding, and just paying attention to those staff development amounts. Everything else, I mean, we paid everybody during the pandemic. We didn't have any furloughs, and we kept people working online to the extent that we could. So I'm not anticipating that being a problem for us this upcoming year.
Okay, so no mousetraps on the horizon out there for us?
Don't think so. We'll talk more about that mobile library in a minute here, because it is going to be a budget challenge for us, but I've got a couple of ideas.
Thank you.
And the other budget is just what you'd want to see for expenses so far this year. And since, there's only been about 2 weeks in the fiscal year, it's not like there's any sort of areas there that are of any particular concern.
Michael, just looking at it, just curiosity, under the MLS reimbursement, how many staff members are going for their master's degree at this point?
Mary Ann, help me here, but I believe it's 2. Is it 2 or 3, Mary Ann?
Okay.
Let me look it up. I think it's 3.
I think it's 3, yeah.
Okay, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so, John, in case you're not familiar with this, SMERLA provides a certain amount of money. It used to be just to get the MLIS, the Master of Library and Information Science degree, but it has been changed so that it is now open for other things. So computer certification could be included in that, possibly something related to an undergraduate degree that would help us. So there's at least one undergraduate degree in library science, or something having to do with literature might help us, or sociology. So we are looking to expand that to the limit of SMERLA's funding, which is about $10,000 a year.
Michael,
Yes.
we are currently helping two people.
Two people, okay.
Get their MLIS. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who are enrolled in programs.
Okay. So 7 people seeking a degree, and not everybody's seeking financial aid. And I'm not quite certain why that would be, other than the fact that when you are spending money, it is a tax write-off. So as an educational expense, so some people may simply be using this to have a better tax outcome. But we do, everybody is aware of this funding being available. With no further questions, then we do have an update on our ARPA grant, and I sent you emails a week ago Friday when that news was announced to us. 2 of the grants we sought were not given. That was the improvements at Lexington Park and Charlotte Hall. I don't necessarily agree with the state libraries' look at those. They were capital projects. I mean, they would involve some building, some renovation, but the ARPA grant guidelines that were given to us would have allowed for that, for creating new spaces under COVID. But the way they interpret it is that if it was a capital project, it would have to go through the capital grant program. So they denied those 2, unfortunately. We did get 2. One is for $50,000, and that is for continuing the ebook program, and that's a pass-through. We benefit to the tune of about $4,000 from that, $2,000 for the app and $2,000 to have troubleshooting on the app, so that if we ever have a technical problem with it, we don't have to do that ourselves. That's through a company called Lyrasis. There's going to be a major change in the app this upcoming year. Previously, it was called Simply E, and it is a live app, and you can download it onto your iOS or your Android device now, and there's plenty of content available. It was working really well for about 3 years, and then this past year, it developed some bugs. So the company we work with, Lyrasis, has a $5 million grant, and they are going to eliminate the problems from it, and it's being renamed PALACE. That's PALACE, as in palaces for the people, which is what Andrew Carnegie called the libraries that he funded. It's sort of the idea is democratization. It's something that everybody can have access to, and everybody is respected. And this is going to be a digital version of that. It will include content from Amazon, which until this year has not been sharing its unique content with libraries. I'm also hopeful that a company called Audible, which is a subdivision of Amazon, which has many, many audiobooks that are of very high interest, is also going to come on board. So we will be working with other libraries in the state. Right now, there are a total of 8 who have deployed the app to convert it over to PALACE, and then to launch that content. And my aim for St. Mary's County is, once we see the new version of the app and we guarantee sort of that it's working well, is to make it our default. It will get content from our Overdrive, from RB Digital, from the DPLA Exchange, which is where the Amazon content is going to appear. It doesn't get content yet from Hoopla, but it will offer more content than the apps we have now, should be easy to use and should be functioning perfectly, and we want to make that kind of just our default. When people come to the library, we say, you should use Palace to get your digital content. So we, again, are sort of awaiting it to be completely launched, and I do want to evaluate it, but with any luck, that will become our default app, and so we do benefit from this grant to a certain extent, as do other libraries in the state, both for deployment of the app and getting content. The other grant was for the mobile library, and we had asked for $370,000, and they gave us $250,000. Normally, I jump up and down to have $250,000, but obviously there's a little bit of a shortfall there. So we will be in touch with our consultant and talk about how to make adjustments as necessary, but we are going to be seeking other funds. Delegate Crosby has suggested that he will put in for $100,000 for us. We don't know if we'll get that money or not. It would not appear till next July, but I don't think the vehicle is going to be ready until then, because right now there's quite a shortfall. Initial plans on this, we're going to notify the county that we have this and already begin advocating for some additional FTEs, because we will need staffing for the vehicle, and that was included for this first year. So I have a Zoom conference coming up with the State Library to talk about how to begin to use this. My first sense is that we probably do want to get at least one staff member who would be full-time, who would be outreach, who would begin to oversee development of the vehicle, who would begin to make community contacts. So, for example, with daycares, with senior facilities, with neighborhoods, and we want to put in place a schedule whereby it will be known, all right, on this day at this time, the vehicle is going to be at X place. And so members of the public who might not have such easy access to the library will be able to we'll be able to know that it will be there, and perhaps we can reach people we've not reached before, or not reached as often, certainly, in some of the outlying areas of the county. Very exciting. The real question is going to be where to come up with the additional funding. So Delegate Crosby, again, is looking at some funding. We'll probably ask the county possibly for some funding for the vehicle as well. We do have money in the foundation and some in the Friends. The Friends will be having their book sales again, and if they raise as much as they did in the past, and cross your fingers, we'll actually have closed most of the gap on that funding. Between what we have, about $25,000 in the foundation. Now the foundation will be having an event, or certainly some sort of outreach this fall. So between that, and if we can get some money through the state, through Delegate Crosby's efforts, I think that we'll close that funding gap very nicely. And the question about making it sustainable then comes down to getting some FTEs from the county. And we will reach out to our stakeholders, including the Health Department, the Department of Social Services, who we hope to do some programming with, certainly to the daycare owners who have for many years hoped that we would be able to deliver this service, to come advocate for us. So I think we're going to be able to bring this off. It's very exciting, but there is going to be some work to do on it. The library does have a healthy fund balance. I think that if there's any shortfalls, we could consider using some of that fund balance of about $400,000 to get the vehicle, but not for staffing. That has to be something that we figure out and work with on the county. So I wish we had gotten the full amount, but I'm encouraged. We may have to make the vehicle maybe not quite 28 feet, maybe 24. We're going to look and see what all our options are on that, but we'll be moving forward with it. So any questions on the ARPA grants?
So when you say 400,000, is that the either or both of the Vanguard funds, or is it in checking, or what?
That's the library's rainy day fund. It's not the Vanguard fund. It's not the the healthcare retirement fund, which is a $1,300,000 about that now, and that has to stay. We don't touch that money.
So it's savings.
Yeah, this is savings, yes.
And how hard is that working for us?
Well, it's in P&C. I would not say that it's invested in a way that it might bring us as much as it could, but nor are we losing anything on it.
essentially a
And
money
basically what happens with our funds is we get money from the state, we get money from the county, it goes into this account, we draw out as necessary to do all our various expenses.
So I'm a little worried with that balance. Are we kind of out of FDIC coverage?
No, I think we're good for that. It's not in like a standard bank account. It's like in a P&C investment.
Maybe you and I could explore that a little bit offline. I'm a little bit
Sure.
lost about what you're explaining.
Sure. Happy to send you emails with a full accounting on that.
Okay. My second question is, given that this project may or may not get some or all of what Delegate Crosby intends to do for us, and because it is kind of an exciting thing with county-wide ramifications, how is the foundation going to gear up to maybe approach the general public to chime in on this thing?
Yeah, we have a foundation meeting this week, which is our first gathering since the good news came down the pike, so that will be a topic of conversation. We have a couple of fundraising events in the pipeline for August and September, but obviously this kind of changes the scope a little bit. So,
Do you all do anything actively to encourage endowment giving through planned giving?
we have not as of yet.
Okay. Is that on the drawing board?
It can be.
You're welcome to join our foundation meeting. We could, in fact, use some more folks there and float some ideas. I think that this is going to give the foundation, the way it had with the New Leonardtown Library, something to really promote. Mm-hmm. And I do think that because it will serve the whole county and not just part of the county, that this will be an opportunity to do a little bit more fundraising than perhaps we have been able to do. But certainly we're going to be looking at getting the word out.
Okay.
Well, I think that's the important issue here, because really we've gone from petitioning for a grant, now we need to go into sort of a marketing mode in order to encourage people to give. And I think if we start maybe communicating to the general population to develop some excitement within the community and providing different avenues through which they can help out, where they can contribute, I think that would really be advantageous. And also would look at some of the ways we can point to the advantages. I think one of the key areas is that we have two other counties that currently have mobile libraries, and I think their experiences in generating interest would really be helpful to us, because I really think the mobile library reaches out to a population that probably minimally uses the libraries, uses the buildings because of the distance or whatever reason. So I think this is a great selling tool to say, hey, look, it's working well in these two counties, and here are some illustrations of reaching out to people we normally don't get to. And I think we can use that in our overall marketing strategy as well.
And just to chime in, Michael mentioned the other agencies. That is really a great way to get them involved. I think that's a great point, because they have information that they would like to share, and too as well. So just connecting in with other agencies for funding, ongoing, sustaining might be something to think about. But I'm so happy we got that money, most of it.
Yes, and Janice, thank you
Thank
to
you.
you because the NAACP provided a letter of support for the grant. And certainly we'll be working with other organizations like the NAACP or the UCAC to get the word out about this exciting development and to find neighborhoods to visit. So, for example, the neighborhood by the old Carver Elementary School, I think is very much on our radar as a place where, and I'm just going to make up something right now. This is not the schedule, but Wednesday at 5 p.m. That's where it's going to be for an hour, and those people then will have access to the Wi-Fi, to computers on board, to the materials that it will be carrying, possibly to a program. And that might not be an area where there were kids who could easily get to Lexington Park Library. It's not very far away, but it's certainly not walkable. And so that's the kind of thing that I think that we can really capitalize on, in addition to some of the more formal stops, like at a daycare, for example. So I'm very excited about this prospect, and we're going to do our best to make it work.
Michael, one other question about the other grant. How likely do you think you'll be able to get Audible in this process? Because you know how Amazon has been about.
Well,
issue.
that would be a good segue to our next topic here, actually. But right now, New York has also passed legislation similar to Maryland's. And the difference there is that whereas when we put our legislation forward, we got opposition from the Association of American Publishers saying, don't do this. But Amazon approached us and said, please don't make it July, make it January. And we did. Now, New York did not do that. So as soon as they present that legislation to Governor Cuomo, and I was away this past week, so I don't know if they've done that yet, and assuming he signs it, which I don't see he will not do, or certainly it can become law without his signature the way it happened here, because they too had not a single negative vote on this. Their legislation takes place almost immediately, and suddenly Audible would no longer be in compliance with New York law if they were withholding content from libraries. That could happen any time now. So it's really a question of how much pressure Audible would be feeling from having a law in place saying, in New York State, the publisher's backyard, fairly populous, not to mention Maryland coming up, and other states are also lining up to do this. Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island are all introducing or have legislation pending. I think that Audible probably would do exactly what Amazon, and Audible is a division of Amazon, and say, okay, we're going to go with Digital Public Library of America and make our content available that way too. I mean, there's other things they could do. They could simply refuse to sell to consumers in Maryland and New York. I think that very unlikely. They could, I don't think the Association of American Publishers has jurisdiction to launch a suit against any of this, but they could say, fine, we're not going to comply, come get us. What are you going to do? I think that's a really bad public relations move on their part. We're not going to sell to libraries. We're not going to benefit people who use libraries. That's probably not a very good look for them. How likely is it? It's, I have no inside knowledge. I wish I did. I think that they will probably come on board in a limited way, the same way Amazon has. And it won't necessarily be through all library vendors. Then it becomes a question of whether or not they're doing this just to comply with the law and also to avoid any possible antitrust taint. It looks like you're withholding from libraries, and there's already some, antitrust moves going against some of these big tech companies. Whether they're just doing it to stay in compliance with the law and work in a very limited fashion, or if this is a exploration into the market and see how they need to make it work to expand their operations and work through all library vendors. And I realize I didn't answer your question as clearly as I might have, but that's kind of what it looks like.
I was curious because you mentioned the states that are either doing it now or will be doing it soon in terms of issuing legislation. They're all on the East Coast. Are there any other efforts?
Those are the ones that I know of. Rhode Island actually has legislation in place. It's in front of their legislation. But there are others. Virginia is putting together an effort, and Washington State as well. I would say that they're all kind of forward-facing library states. And they've got strong state library associations. But I have heard from Arkansas and from Illinois, so it would not be impossible to see some efforts move forward there too. Those are, as I say, just the three I know that there's something definite happening. So that sort of brings up our next topic, and that is, I was thinking it might be released over this past week, but it looks from an email that it hasn't been. We prepared a statement on what reasonable is. So the Maryland law says that vendors, publishers will provide to libraries under reasonable terms. Well, what are reasonable terms? So AAP said, well, that's really vague. The law is too vague. It can't be enforceable. So we said, well, it was just a scaffolding under which to open conversations with the publishers, and you have to talk to each publisher individually. There's no group that can speak for all publishers in terms of pricing on digital content, because the Department of Justice would look very unfavorably on what could look like price fixing. So we put together a statement on what is reasonable, and it's very broad. But to summarize it, what we're looking for from digital is the same sort of cost per unit that we have for print or for audio disc. So it doesn't matter how long a license would be or what the cost would be if the average out would be kind of what we're looking at when we get a print book for the public. Now, this is not to say that we're asking publishers to give up licensing. That's how they do digital content. It's not through copyright with the right of first sale the way print is. I mean, we can buy a book from any vendor. It's ours to own. Digital content is not handled that way at all. What we're saying is, here's what we're doing for print. That seems to be working fine for you. Wouldn't it be reasonable if how your charges worked out, it were roughly costing us the same of what print would cost? And there are already a lot of publishers whose license terms and rates are pretty much right there. I'll mention one, HarperCollins, one of the big 5 publishers. Their average cost on an ebook for 26 circs is about $14, $15. So we're looking, 50 cents a throw? That's probably, by the time we factor everything in, for a print book, what we'd pay per circulation there too. Some of the other publishers a little bit less favorable, but if you're, so if you give us a 2-year license and you're going to charge us $50, $60, that's reasonable. If you're charging $90 or $100, that's not so reasonable. It's not going to be a print equivalent. So we'll just put this statement out there, and The idea is not so much that the publishers are all going to say, oh, yes, you're right, and instantly do that, so much as it opens a conversation with the various publishers. We are working with the American Library Association on this release, and we will hope to have some publishers come to the table. It could just be that they'll say, well, you've been buying from us already, therefore we're already reasonable. But it keeps the issue in the public eye. And if libraries don't continue to advocate, then no change will happen. So this is just another step in trying to find better prices so that we can provide digital content to more people.
I have a question about the whole process here. So let's pretend we're buying a novel, Tom Clancy novel, and you're getting the library's publisher's price, okay? So in books of general circulation like that, what would be its shelf life with us, do you think? Because I'm trying to compare we've bought it and it's there for everybody versus how we price rental over what period of time on a comparable basis.
Well, our statement includes that, and there are statistics on kind of the average life of a hardcover, the average life of a paperback, and we gave both of those. So you're only able to circulate one person at a time with print, and with digital, in some cases, licenses allow simultaneous use. So it can be complicated to do a strict comparison, but let's say we buy our John Grisham or our Tom Clancy or whatever in hardcover when it first comes out. Our price will probably be about $17. Now, the very first time it gets used, somebody might spill coffee on it, and we don't have that book anymore. This is one of the publisher arguments, is that ebooks can be forever, so if we're going to license them for a limited period of time. And what we in Maryland are saying, okay, fine, let's just price them accordingly. So, but let's say on average you're getting about 35 circs out of a hardcover. And that will be a very popular one. You might buy a hardcover, let's say it's a nonfiction work. It's interesting, but it's not one of the blockbuster political bestsellers that happened last year. It gets, in its lifetime, 5 or 6 circulations at $17. Suddenly, you're no longer looking at pennies per use, especially by the time it gets processed and we put stickers on it and we put a cover on it and we check it in and out and people have to reshelve it. There's all kinds of extra cost involved with the print that we don't typically think about. So what we're saying is, roughly across our collections, here's the kind of cost we pay for print or for disc audio, and we want the digital cost to approximate that. It's fair in the physical format. Why can't it be fair in a digital format? Why should we have to pay, for example, the President Obama's most recent book that came out last year, on a per circ basis, it was going to be $9.50 if we paid per circ for it. That's just not sustainable for a library. So take the price down. At the same time, we know the publishers and the authors need to make a living. So we're not trying to be unreasonable here, I think. As I say, we'll kind of see what the publishers have to say, if anything. But my hope is what we're going to do is we're going to get this statement out there, and then we're going to communicate with Publishers Weekly, with Library Journal, with the Washington Post. And they're going to be the ones asking the publishers questions, not us. They will say, all right, here's this statement, what do you think? How do you respond to that? But then we individually in Maryland or at the American Library Association's Digital Content Working Group or somebody can open negotiations with publishers individually. We'll go to this publisher and say, okay, talk to us now. And try to work out something with them. Yeah, so some of the funny examples of this are the dog behavior book that comes back after the first circuit's got tooth marks all over it. Oops. So, while a print book properly kept could last for years and years and years, and we used to have reference books that were like that. For most public libraries these days, circulation is probably one of the most important factors. We want something that's going to give us a good return and be popular, and so there's more possibility for looking at, this is not a reference book we want to keep forever, although what we are hoping in Maryland is that some of the publishers will go back to, it can be a very high price, a forever kind of circulation. You license this forever. You get to keep it as long as we hold the rights to it. And that way we can try to provide that sort of preservation of the intellectual record that libraries would really like to do.
Thank you.
So I will send you a link to the statement once it comes out and let you know how it's going. I do present you our annual staff demographics and turnover reports, as we do every July. The demographics one probably should have been printed landscape and not portrait. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. The turnover one should have been probably printed landscape instead of portrait, so it can be a little bit difficult to read in this format. But let's go ahead and look at the demographics first. And what I've done as usual here is that you can see it broken down by branch, by level of employment in the library. So we look at part-time versus full-time. We look at directors, coordinators, which is kind of the sort of next level of responsibility, branch managers, assistant managers and librarians, the office manager, the IT assistants, all the way down to PTA and page. And you can kind of see at different levels what staff demographics look like. This is a snapshot. It's done each June. So during the year, there might be some slight changes to that. We don't track it across the full year. But as you can see, looking at the library as a whole, that we are fairly reflective of county demographics. Obviously, the women versus men is not going to be the same. That's just what happens in libraries. It is a female-dominated profession. But the county estimate for 2019 was about 73.5% white, and we are at 76.39, African American at 14.9%, and we are at 19.44%. Hispanic at 5.6, and we're at 4.17, and then we don't have any Asian or other or multi. And this, I should say, is just based on how staff self-identify. We don't send out a questionnaire on this. I think staff might find that intrusive. So overall, we're fairly nicely reflective of the county demographics. If you look per branch, you'll see that Lexington Park has about 33% of its employees are African American, perhaps nicely reflecting the percentage of the population in that area, that part of the county, less so in Leonardtown, and about average, I'd say, in Charlotte Hall. I guess I'd say that the not so good news is that while we do fairly well up through the librarian level, that in the administration and branch managers were not as reflective of the county demographics as perhaps we could be.
Is this
So
a tool
question
for-
about this.
Is this a tool for something we're supposed to be doing?
Well, the board's instruction to me are to foster diversity in hiring, and this is a way we track that. And certainly the mandate from the board is that the library should be reflecting county demographics. And so I would say for the most part it does. Obviously, we're dependent on who applies for our positions. But we do then do our best to make sure that we are being as equitable in hiring as we would like to be. This is a challenge for the whole library profession. So I would say we're doing okay, but could do slightly better at some higher levels.
Does this mean that we are or
Michael?
are not marketing ourselves job-wise to those segments that are underrepresented?
Well, we do, and hope to, but again, we're kind of dependent in some ways on who applies for jobs, obviously. Marianne, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to let you all know that we have been very proud of the fact that we hire interns in the summer, and then several of our interns have then become regular employees moving up within the system. And we just hired our latest intern, Morgan, to be a librarian at Charlotte Hall. So that's very exciting. And she is African American, so I was very pleased to be able to hire her, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she brings to the library system. She is, I think, planning to get her library degree.
So already these statistics will
Mike?
change, as you can see. Yes, go ahead, Janice.
Yes, I have been on the board almost 10 years now, and have seen such a improvement on hiring, diversity in hiring, and it's been really, great to see, and just appreciate all that's been done. As I looked at the report, and as I always say, just, really encouraging more people, period, to become librarians and to get involved in the library programs. And I think that's part of the career day efforts and things in the schools and working with the colleges. So I know everybody has a lot on their plate, but, and especially with diversity and now being such a hot topic, but not just hot topic, but, it's something that has to happen. I did note that administration is an area that is still to be worked on, in my view, and I know you do, Marianne. I know you reach out. And also, when you look at it, you look at the paraprofessionals is a big chunk of that. So again, encouraging those paraprofessionals to move into positions as well. So thank you for the work that's been done, and for even having it on as a data point. I don't think that it was really looked at as seriously as it has been with Mary Ann and Michael over these last few years.
Well, we will.
I also wanted to say that we are participating in a career fair at St. Mary's College on August 28th. So we are, and I believe it's the, actually, I'm not sure what office this person is from. Michael might know. It's E.M. Berry is the person who contacted us. I don't actually have the name of the person. But anyway, we are participating in a career fair.
Marianne, do any of our people get invited to Career Day at the elementary schools?
Occasionally, it's been a while. I have participated at a few, so it really depends on the principal and how involved they are with the library, what their partnership level is?
Well, it was my experience when I was still employed. Now that I'm retired, I don't have this problem, but somebody in all those schools is responsible for organizing Career Day. And the key is to find out who they are and whether or not what we as a library can bring to Career Day. Here's who we are, here's how we work, here's what I do every day, and then you throw in a couple of, shall we say, good behavior tips for them in terms of their future employment, and you wind up getting invited back over and over and over again. So it gets us down into the school to help them out with Career Day speakers, but it also gets us out in front of the school as a whole as being more engaged down there at the elementary school level. So I may have a couple of names for you. I'll try and dredge them up, and you get in touch with them. Maybe we can get a speakers bureau going on Career Day throughout the county.
I would also
Yes, definitely send them my way.
I would echo Janice too, in that the progress and the increasing diversity of the staff is really commendable, and I appreciate everything Michael and Marianne and the whole team is doing. And I think thinking a lot about recruitment also, and sort of going back to what John said, really about building relationships, and how are we building relationships with underrepresented communities, organizations, points of access to get people to really consider working at the library, and this is a career field. And I appreciate that we're not just sitting back and waiting for people to come to us, but I hope we can continue to develop those relationships and really engage in some proactive outreach across the county to get to some of these underrepresented communities and show that the library is a place for them and a career for them.
Yeah, this has been an issue
I
that we've
really
talked.
think that the mobile can help with that too.
Yeah, I do too.
When we get that mobile library, that can really be, one day could just be a librarian, themes. There's so much that can be done with that, and taking it around to the kids and to the schools on certain days, because the children will get this and information and take it home where some of the parents wouldn't know, don't know. The kids will come home and say, look what I got from the library today. Take me, Mom. Take me, Aunt, Uncle. Mm-hmm. So I think that could really help with recruitment as well, and getting the kids interested in, so many areas.
Especially since all the kids now have those smart cards. I mean, that's a point of entry, perhaps.
Yeah,
Well-
I think, again, we've talked about this issue over the years, and some of the problems and issues that we face in trying to increase the representation, particularly in the upper categories, the upper positions. Having had a lot of experience working with regulatory agencies, federal and state, they tend to focus more on the distribution, not the total numbers. But there are challenges. There are regional challenges, there are compensation challenges, particularly when you have to go outside to the local area. And we've experienced that too on the Smyrna level, that the difficulties in recruiting in a more rural area, especially among other states where we're drawing from more populated segments, is always a challenge. But I think what we're talking about here principally is it's a long process before we can cultivate that interest in library science and eventually lead to the leadership roles within those. But every effort we need to take advantage of to really plant the seeds, in effect, so that in the future that becomes less of a problem, less of a limitation, and particularly filling the more senior levels within the library itself.
Well, another thing to consider is the fact that we are competing against professions that may offer more in terms of salaries. You don't go into librarianship to become wealthy. Even teachers tend to get paid better. So it can be a very difficult thing. And Jim, as you point out, in a rural area, I know the hospital struggles with this, the schools struggle with this to attract, talent down our way. Everybody but the base, who manages quite nicely for the most part, thank you. But it's, getting people to go into the profession, even though it's a very well-regarded one, and I see statistics that say that along with law enforcement and the medical profession, librarians are one of the most trusted professions in the country, according to Pew study. That's great to see, but then getting people to go into it when they don't necessarily think, well, that's a 21st century career, or that's how I'm going to, make a lot of money, can be a challenge. Specific example, my youngest son, 4-year degree from Ohio State, is in computers and making as much money as I am as a library director. So we do have other competition we've got to look at, but we'll continue to do our best work on this.
Well, also, too, you got to consider that we're going to look in the future, how many occupations now are done from home? And I think even in Pax River, I know a number of people that I'm familiar with are working from home and will continue to do so even after the pandemic no longer an issue. In Smyrna, we've hired a second person, keeping in mind it's only 15 people, who is working remotely. I mean, really remotely, in some case in Florida and the other place I forgot. But you can't do that with librarians. So there are a lot of dynamics that come into the challenges of staffing within a library communities. We just have to try as best we can to deal with them.
Well, there's another nice segue, thank you for that, into our next report, which is staff turnover. And again, this would be easier to read if it had been printed landscape. My apologies on that. But you'll see that this was a very challenging year, and incidentally, the person three people who have subsequently submitted resignations. One of them has got a full-time opportunity as a data librarian on the base, for example. They're not included, they'll be included next year. But we had a 27% turnover in staff this year. And one of the most striking things about it is if you look where a lot of that turnover came, it came among exempt staff. That was almost 50% of the people who are administration, branch managers, or full-time managers or assistant managers who are exempt employees. We've only got 15 in the whole system, and we had, as I say, 46.67% turnover in those positions. Some of these were expected in light of the pandemic. So we had 3 employees from Leonardtown, the manager and 2 of the assistant managers, who between them had 147 years in when the pandemic happened. Although they might have planned to go on for another couple of years, they kind of looked at their lives and said, I've got 50 years or 47 years in, the new library is built, I think it's time for me to do something else. So not surprising on some of those. I'd say the thing that's kind of a little bit more disturbing is that I'd call 3 of these hires dysfunctional, the 3 leavings dysfunctional. That doesn't mean that they were bad employees. It means just the opposite. They're people we would really like to have kept. But as, for example, the person who just recently decided to leave because they got a full-time data librarian job on the base, that's somebody we would have liked to have kept. But we didn't have a full-time opportunity for that person. So we had a person leave because they were going to make more money, and this was not at a very senior level. They were going to make more money at Target than they were making at the library at that level of employment. So I would say are behind in salaries compared to the surrounding counties, or Smyrna. that's a challenge for us. The pandemic, did make some people leave. We had some employees who just simply didn't want to come back and work with the public anymore. So some of these are not surprising, but this has been a challenging year. We are hopeful that we'll have more stability this upcoming year. That said, I don't think anybody's leaving. When they leave, we mostly just get these really glowing letters of resignation. It was wonderful to work for the library. It was a great place to work. And then some others we lost just because, we hire people whose spouses work at the base, and those people get transferred and they move along. So there's different reasons why, but we are hoping for a little bit more stability this upcoming year. And last year we were about at 11%, which is more typical for us. And that really kind of makes us better than most industries across the board, and better than most nonprofits. This year being an exception, I'd be interested to see other statistics because so today's headline from SHRM is "Prepare for the upcoming leaving tsunami," where employers are seeing a lot of people getting ready to leave for other opportunities, and so I don't think we're alone there. Well, I provided you with a list of some of our significant operations during the fiscal year of '21. I don't know that I'm going to go into those in depth because you have the opportunity to read them, but I would say that in spite of very challenging circumstances, that our staff performed very well this past year. And I'll point to a changeover from primarily in-person programming to very successful virtual programming as one of our main accomplishments for the year. Obviously operating safely during the pandemic, and being open as much as any library in Maryland was throughout that time. We were really kind of cutting edge in staying open while remaining safe, in quickly adopting to take all the proper precautions so that we could be safe, and taking advantage of grant opportunities to get, among other things, those air filtration units, and to get lots of PPE and I think particular congratulations to Mary Ann, who's our MLA president for this year, and Jill, who's going to be our Children's Division president. We give a lot at a state and national level in a way that's, I'd say, exceptional for a library of our size. And that we are leaders in the field, as well as providing great service within the county. We had a lot more successful author visits than we perhaps had in the past, and some interesting new programming. I'd say that our work with the health department registering people for the vaccination or providing different types of PPE supplies with our 3D printers were certainly something that we can look back with a considerable amount of pride. Obviously, the final opening of the Leonardtown Library during very difficult circumstances, something that we can look back and say that we have considerable reason for pride. We have come through, and obviously the pandemic's not over, and we need to continue to be careful. But I'm hopeful that this year is going to be a little bit more representative of normal library operations upcoming than the past one was. Questions on any of those?
Michael, I think this is an excellent complement to the statistics we talked about earlier, which are pretty hard to make sense of. I feel like this gives a really great portrait of what the library is doing, and I appreciate kind of the breadth of activities that are captured here, and I appreciate how much is quantified within this document to know what the reach was like. And I think this is a lot of really good fodder for future fundraising efforts and really just kind of shaping the narrative of what the library has been doing. So I think this is a great resource.
Well, thank you, Michael. The amount of things that we do, given our level of staffing, and I typically, when I give you that staff turnover report on Charles and Calvert in terms of their level of staffing, and I haven't heard from Calvert yet, but Charles actually grew in the number of employees this past year, and there's almost a $3 million gap between what Charles has in terms of funding and we have now. Not surprisingly, they're able to pay a lot better, and they have a lot more staff. We still get an incredible amount done for a library of our size. We are concerned in administration about how much people do, and so we're trying to very delicately balance when we go back to the in-person programming to make sure that people are not going to feel like too much is being asked of them. But with our finite resources, it's difficult to get more staff, for example. So I think for the level of staff we have, that we've got a lot to be proud of.
Yes.
I think we would all agree with that as a board.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we've got 3 things for you to approve for us, and the first one is about volunteering, probably is operational and you don't have to, but I do present it to you just so your awareness, but also to get your buy-in. Just a couple changes in some of the volunteering procedures. We're adding in blue a statement under where it says amended on that document. So teen volunteers are requested to be age 14 years and older with limited openings available. It used to be 13, so I said, well, why are you changing it to 14? And the answer is that that is the age in which many people are beginning to go into high school. And we've noticed you wouldn't think so, but between the ages of 13 and 14, a fair increase in the level of maturity. So that's the reason kind of for that change.
Can I ask in that same sentence, what is with limited openings available? Is that the teen volunteer should have limited openings available?
Yes. I think that's in place just to say, you know, a lot of people want their teen to be able to volunteer at the library, and a lot of people actually want their teen to be able to work at the library. And I certainly understand that. It's a safe place with a good environment, surrounded by books and people who like books. I mean, it's a great volunteer opportunity. We're simply saying, you know, we just don't have the capacity to take, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people there.
Yeah, there are a couple of things, Michael, and I tend to agree with Michael. It's an awkward sentence, though, with that on the end of it. The other thing is, says teen volunteers are requested, they're required to be, not requested to be. And I would drop the D from age. It's age 14 years, not aged.
Like a fine wine.
Right.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm getting this right here so that I can have the policy change properly. Are requested to be age, I'm taking off a D, 14 years or older, and you just want a period there?
Well, first of all, it's required, not requested to be.
Required, okay.
Yeah, I would make if you want to make that point, make a sentence out of it rather than attaching to the sentence and where it is now.
Okay, so I've got teen volunteers are required to be age 14 years or older with limited openings available right now. Is there any other changes you would like to see made there?
Well, I'm not sure you're doing that. it doesn't fit in the sentence, what I'm getting at, Michael. You're talking about the age requirement, and say with limited experience openings available. That doesn't, you simply need to place it somewhere else so that it doesn't blend in with a sentence it doesn't fit.
How about the second sentence, so that the second sentence would read, limited volunteer opportunities exist for both adults and teens?
Yeah, that may be fine.
I'm sorry to get in the weeds on this, but I just
No,
found
it's all
that
right.
sentence confusing.
Yeah.
So you wish to make it, teen volunteers are required to be 14 years or older, period, and then to say, what, please? Limited,
Perhaps in that second sentence, to just add the word limited before volunteer opportunities.
limited volunteer opportunities exist for both adults and teens. All right.
I don't know.
Thank you.
I always trust a lawyer to come up with the right wording.
Or to just bleed the life out of the language.
Just a comment about requested and required. So that would mean if you had a 13-year-old that wanted to volunteer and you thought that person was mature enough and all, they could not volunteer. Sometimes you have little 13-year-olds that can do this. So you close the door.
Right, I think that is why they use the word requested instead of required.
Yeah, because middle schoolers, some of them, this is an opportunity. And most of them, going into high school. That's just my thoughts. And you have kids like that, their parents will bring them and they will, keep up with what they're doing. So just a thought.
Request is just not the right word. I mean, I don't want to nitpick over wording, but it just seems like an odd phrase for when you're establishing a requirement. If 13 is acceptable, then go with 13, but then you don't say requested.
Should be.
How about preferred?
Great.
That sounds good.
So instead of requested or required, we are at preferred? Okay.
I don't know, I think you gotta have a bottom cutoff.
Yeah, I guess I agree with John. I mean, that you changed it from 13 to 14 for a reason. Now you're saying that there was no need to do it in the beginning. And yeah, you do need a bottom. Well, you have a 10-year-old who wants to work. Does that mean, you got to be careful, because when you establish an open requirement, you leave yourself open to, well, why didn't you accept my child at 12? Or it's a dangerous precedence to leave a requirement that you feel is necessary and then take it away.
I'm fine with leaving it at required. So what it says right now is limited volunteer opportunities exist for both adults and teens. Teen volunteers are required to be age 14 years or older. And that is what that says. Looking down, the original says, volunteers perform a variety of tasks which are important in the operational library. These tasks might include, and the amended simply adds kind of a fuller description of what some of the things our volunteers might do. And then we also asked to try to
I
find
just want to
out.
clarify something.
I'm sorry, what?
I just want to clarify something. So we have a new policy and procedures team that's been working on all of our policies and procedures. And this is actually procedural, it's not policy. This is actually the content that's on our website. Amy Dickinson is leading that team, and she just didn't understand that policies are approved by the board, but procedures are approved by admin. So this information will go on our website. So I just wanted to clarify that. This isn't policy.
Yeah, I understand that, Mary, and I think, again, if we look at all the things that we review, frankly, Michael and you goes further than really in the strict board staff relationship. We appreciate that. But I think when you have something that's communicated to the public, it puts it in a different arena than what you would define as operational, in other words, how you do things internally. So my recommendation is to continue to go to the board with procedures or whatever you want to call it that go externally, so that if we're questioned or somebody challenges it, we're aware of what the requirement now is.
And that's why I'm bringing this forward to you, is anything that is made public, I want you to have a chance to see. And so I am asking for your approval. So we've got the changes on the wording there, and then the other amendation is simply the addition of other things that could be done, and a request then to have what, people to say what they might like to do, and then also a note of what volunteers will not be doing. We can't have volunteers, we're not allowed under Maryland law to have volunteers do things that we hire staff specifically to do. So we can't have volunteers run programs or do reference work, do 3D printing, do outreach. Those are all things that are considered to be professional duties, and you can't have volunteers do them. So may I get your approval of this document with the emendations that you've made to the wording?
I move for approval with the requested annotations and modifications.
I'll second. Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay, motion carries.
No, nay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Didn't ask for the nay, nay.
Okay. Okay, so one nay vote.
Okay. The next one is behavior rules and suspension of privileges. We want to add failure to comply with the internet safety policy as something that can be problematic under our behavioral rules. And then at the bottom where it says original, all that in black is replaced by what you see on the second page with a much shorter version of that.
Michael,
Yes. Yes?
I'm sorry. Before we move on, can I just clarify something that Jim said? Because the way I'm taking it is just making our job really hard. So this information about volunteers was going on our website. And Jim, you're saying that anything that goes on our website has to be approved by the board?
No.
That's gonna,
I don't think that's the intention. Basically, what would be behavior guidelines for somebody on the website, I'd like them to see, but no, they certainly don't have to approve everything that's on the website. For one thing, that would slow down the website considerably and also add almost impossibly to our trustees' level of work.
Yeah, I think, Mary, the issue is reasonable judgment.
all of our policies on the website.
Well, again,
Sorry.
it's reasonable judgment.
I think there's a delay.
All right, so are we finished with that, or are we, or do there need to be more discussion on that? I don't see the need for it. Why don't we move on?
So back to the behavior rules and suspension of privileges. There's 2 adjustments there. Are those,
Yeah, I make a motion, we accept the changes to the behavioral policy.
Second.
Okay, any questions, comments? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Aye.
all right, and the final thing we'd like you to take a look at is the closures for the rest of the year. They were approved already, but I just want to make sure that we are good with those, and also to ask for December 10th as an all-staff day. And we did not do that this past year because of the pandemic, but we would like to reinstitute that annual tradition. And John, since you're new, that's a day when we close the library. We get the staff from all 3 libraries to go to one location. We typically have a meal, but more than anything else, we meet and there's some team building exercises, and trustees are invited to that day. In the past, you've occasionally come and other days not, and that's fine. It is an optional thing for you. But so that would be Monday, September 6th for Labor Day, October 11th for Columbus Day, November 11th for Veterans Day. The 24th, we close early on Thanksgiving Eve. Thursday and Friday closures. Friday, December 24th, and Saturday, December 25th would be closures. And Saturday, January 1st, and Monday, January 3rd, which is the government recognition of New Year's Day, because, so if I could get your approval on those things, it would be appreciated.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve the revised holiday schedule.
I'll second.
Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
motion carries.
Our next meeting will be August 16th, right here in this building, or you may still join through Zoom or the telephone. Dates to remember, October 6th through 9th, we're having a conference. CORE is the American Library Association's administrative unit, so library directors, deputy directors, branch managers, things like that belong to that unit. On October 6th, there will be a tour of 4 libraries that that one of my ALA groups, the Architecture for Public Libraries, of which I'm the co-chair, organized. So we'll be touring the Pratt Library, the new Michael Bush Annapolis Library, and Community College, which has a new library in Anne Arundel, and then a recently refurbished library in Baltimore County. And if you would like to go on that, we will arrange for you to take that tour. Lunch will be served. But then there's going to be a 3-day conference with different programs and events. As more detail on that becomes available, I'll let you know in case you would like to attend. But that is going to be an in-person event. It will kind of be the first ALA in-person event since ALA Midwinter way back in January of 2020. So looking forward to that.
Are we going to showcase our new building at some?
It's up in Baltimore, so it's a bit of a drive down here.
Okay, is there anything any board member wants to bring up? If not, the meeting is adjourned.
John, to answer your question, our architect Grimman Parker has put forward the new Leonardtown Library in a design award competition. So we'll see if we can't get some notice that way. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Michael, just a quick announcement, the NAACP and partners, including the library, will be sponsoring a back-to-school fair on August 14th at Lancaster Park from 12 to 3 with many community resources will be there. And it's a bag free giveaway, backpacks and supplies. just a host of other groups